I want you to close your eyes for a second and just picture a fairy garden.
Oh, yeah, like the classic childhood picture book kind of vibe.
Exactly. You probably immediately see what was, perfectly captured in those really gentle animated shows from when we were kids.
Right, with the pastel aesthetics.
Yeah, like that show with the blue heeler dogs. You know the exact scene I'm talking about?
Oh, I totally do.
Just a little ring of carefully placed, moss-covered rocks right at the base of this ancient weeping willow tree.
With the little dewdrops catching the morning light.
Yes. Dewdrops, delicate wings, fluttering around, maybe a sprinkle of iridescent glitter left on a toadstool.
It's very, it's that pristine, sanitized, deeply Victorian view of magical creatures.
Right, exactly. Leaving little gifts, playing these totally harmless pranks.
Just a fragile ecosystem built entirely out of, like, childhood imagination.
It feels warm, it feels safe.
It does. It is the ultimate manifestation of just benign, whimsical fantasy. Because modern media has entirely conditioned us to view the concept of a fairy through this lens of extreme fragility.
We really do. We think of Tinker Toys and Gossamer Wings.
Right. And harmless mischief. We treat them as delicate ornaments of nature rather than, active participants in it.
But I want you to take that image, the glittering, giggling little winged creature sitting on a toadstool, and I want you to completely shatter it.
Just sweep it right off the table.
Exactly. Sweep it off the table. Because today, we are opening up a stack of really fascinating biological lore records.
And these records are wild.
They really are. And alongside those, we have this very intense transcript of a debate among a group of friends.
Right, Chloe, Marcus, Julian, and Sam.
Yeah, those four. And they spent hours breaking down the science and the mythos of a very, very different kind of fairy.
A completely different paradigm.
So we are doing a deep dive into the legend of a creature known as the mystical hedgehog.
And let me tell you, it is not what you expect.
No. The last time a fairy like this was documented, it wasn't leaving presents under a tree.
Definitely not.
It was a warrior, like a literal battle-hardened dragon slayer.
Which is such a jarring contrast, right?
Mind-blowing.
But what we are examining today is it's much more than just a subversion of a fairy tale. It is a biological marvel. This creature serves as the ultimate dramatic mirror for the age-old debate of nature versus nurture.
That's the core mission of this deep dive, really.
Exactly. We are looking at an organism whose DNA is so fundamentally unstable, so intensely malleable, that its surrounding environment literally rewrites it.
And not just the environment, right?
Yeah.
The celestial cycles of the sun and moon.
Yes. And even profound psychological trauma dictates its physical form.
Which is so heavy.
It is.
Yeah.
And more tragically, those factors dictate its mortality.
So we're talking about a fairy that doesn't have those delicate insect wings we just pictured.
No gossamer wings here.
Instead, it has these long, flowing, ribbon-like feelers.
Which sound elegant at first.
They do. But here is the detail that absolutely floored me when I read through our sources.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
On this specific battle-hardened fairy, those ribbons aren't silk.
No.
They have sharp, serrated metal edges.
Yeah.
They are fleshy appendages biologically designed to slice through dragon scales like a hot knife through butter.
It's just brutal.
It completely inverts every single paradigm of what you or I or anyone else thinks a fairy is supposed to be.
It really does. But to even begin to comprehend how a mammalian organism developed serrated metal ribbons to hunt apex predators.
We have to go back.
Right. We have to start at the absolute baseline.
The very beginning.
We have to look at the genetic blank slate from which this dragon slayer is actually born.
Because you can't understand the weapon until you understand
Yeah.
the raw material it was forged from, right?
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this raw material. The baseline creature documented in these lore records is known simply as the normal hedgehog.
Or, as some of the researchers in the texts refer to it, the evolution Pokemon.
Right. And if you were to just look at it, it sounds almost aggressively normal.
It's very unassuming.
It's small, cute, fluffy. It has this relatively neutral brown and cream appearance.
Yeah, nothing particularly threatening about it.
And it hatches from an egg. If it just lives its life in a field, eating berries and avoiding predators without any bizarre external triggers.
Which is rare, but possible.
Yeah, it has a completely standard mammalian lifespan of about 15 to 20 years.
It's a lump of wet clay.
I love that analogy, a lump of wet clay.
It's perhaps the most biologically accurate metaphor we could use here.
Yeah.
Because one of the individuals in our source transcript, I think it was Julian, who spent significant time analyzing the genetic data.
Right, the science guy of the group.
Yeah. He describes this creature's baseline state as a localized Darwinian explosion just waiting to happen within a single genome.
A localized Darwinian explosion. That is such a cool phrase.
It really is. Its DNA is essentially a genetic sponge.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, in most organisms, DNA is a rigid blueprint. It dictates exactly how the creature will develop, with only really minor variations based on, like, nutrition or environment.
Right, like if I eat more vegetables, I might be healthier, but I won't grow gills.
Exactly. But the normal hedgehog's DNA is in a constant state of flux.
It's just waving.
It is perpetually waiting for an environmental, elemental, or even emotional input to tell its cellular structure what it is actually supposed to become.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the mechanics of that. It's like having a master stem cell on overdrive.
That's a great way to put it.
Going back to your clay analogy, if I have a lump of wet clay, I can leave it in the sun and it bakes hard. I
Right.
can drop it in a puddle and it dissolves.
Yeah.
I can throw it against a wall and it flattens out. The clay doesn't have an internal drive to be a vase or a brick.
No, it just reacts to whatever you do to it.
So the hedgehog's genetics work exactly the same way.
Functionally, yes. It's a concept related to extreme phenotypic plasticity.
Phenotypic plasticity.
Yeah, but dialed up to a level that honestly borders on the miraculous.
Okay, what exactly is phenotypic plasticity for the listener who might not know?
It's the ability of one genotype to produce more than one phenotype or physical form when exposed to different environments.
Oh, okay.
We see mild versions of this in our world. Like, certain reptiles change their sex based on the temperature of their eggs.
Right, like crocodiles, I think.
Exactly. Or certain insects change their wing colors based on the season they hatch in.
Okay, that makes sense.
But this hedgehog takes that concept and applies it to its entire physiological and elemental makeup.
It just goes all the way.
It can evolve into 8 drastically different forms, ranging from aquatic to fiery, psychic to plant-like.
Which brings me to the detail in the source material that I had to read like 3 times just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding
A
it.
genetic reset.
Yes, the absolute genetic reset. Because if you have a creature that can fundamentally rewrite its DNA to become, say, a creature of pure aquatic energy,
Right.
or a creature that generates literal fire, you would think those traits get passed down.
It seems logical.
But the transcript explicitly states that if you take 2 fully evolved hedgehogs, a fiery hedgehog and an aquatic hedgehog, and they breed,
You do not get some steam-powered hybrid offspring.
you don't.
The offspring is always, unequivocally, a base normal hedgehog.
Always.
The genetic reset is absolute.
How is that biologically possible?
It's fascinating, isn't it?
If both parents have fundamentally altered their cellular structures, one to survive in water, one to generate intense heat, how does none of that lived experience make it into the genetic code of the egg?
Because the evolution of this creature is an acquired, localized trait.
Acquired, okay.
It is a reaction, not a fundamental rewriting of the germline.
The germline being the cells that pass on genetic material.
Exactly. Think of it this way. If a human being spends their entire life lifting weights and building massive muscle mass,
Right.
their child isn't born with bulging biceps.
Oh, wow. Okay, that makes it click for me.
The muscle was an acquired environmental adaptation. For the hedgehog, its entire elemental evolution functions just like that muscle.
So the parents' physical adaptations just do not penetrate the reproductive blueprint.
They don't. The wet clay always resets.
That is wild.
Every single normal hedgehog is born with the exact same unwritten future, completely free from the biological baggage of its parents.
I see the logic, but that also creates a massive logistical problem for the survival of the species.
It definitely does.
Which brings up one of the most bizarre and, frankly, unnerving details in these records.
Oh, the lavender slime.
Yes. The source text points out that finding 2 of these hedgehogs in the wild at the exact same time is notoriously difficult.
They are incredibly rare.
So to keep the species from going extinct, they often end up breeding with this creature known only as the lavender slime.
Right. The lavender slime is a notorious species with a very specific, highly adaptable genetic quirk of its own.
Okay.
It possesses the ability to rapidly rearrange its cellular structure to perfectly imitate any creature it encounters. It's a shapeshifter.
Yes, it is a biological mirror.
I have to stop you there, because the group of friends in the transcript seem to just gloss over this.
They treat it as very normal.
But this is horrifying. We're talking about a gelatinous blob that encounters this rare hedgehog.
Yeah.
shifts its entire cellular mass to perfectly mimic a mate, and then produces an egg that hatches a normal hedgehog.
That's the process.
I don't understand how this works in a balanced ecosystem. Is this slime just a biological mimic acting as a parasite?
It's a fair question.
Or is it literally a vital evolutionary crutch? Because it sounds like without this shape-shifting slime, this extremely rare hedgehog species would just vanish from the earth entirely.
It challenges our conventional understanding of reproduction, certainly.
You put it mild.
But rather than a parasite, it actually appears to be an extraordinary form of ecological symbiosis.
Symbiosis, so the hedgehog benefits too.
Exactly. The slime doesn't harm the hedgehog at all. Instead, it provides the reproductive mirror necessary to trigger the conception of a new organism.
Wow.
The slime essentially loans out its biological machinery to help propagate an endangered species.
That is just, it's super weird, but also kind of beautiful.
It is highly efficient, and it ensures that the unstable DNA of the hedgehog survives into another generation.
It's just wild to think that the baseline identity of this creature is so fragile it needs a shape-shifting blob just to exist.
It is a precarious existence.
And before this blank slate of a creature evolves and fundamentally changes its physiology, there is really only one true anchor of individual identity it actually possesses.
Right. It's sexual dimorphism.
The tail pattern.
That is a one constant. Because the overall appearance of the normal hedgehog is so neutral, the primary way to identify males and females is by looking at the tips of their tails.
One of the friends in the transcript, I think it was Chloe, actually sketches this out to explain it.
Oh yeah, her notes are great on this.
The males have this straight-edge tip on their tail, almost like a jagged paintbrush that has been dipped in cream-colored paint.
Very distinct. And the females display a slightly heart-shaped or curved scalloped tip.
It's such a subtle marker.
It really is. It's like the only piece of the clay that has been stamped before the environment gets to it.
And once they evolve into one of the 8 elemental forms, these subtle tail differences can become completely overshadowed.
Or even disappear entirely amidst all those massive physiological changes.
Exactly. But in that baseline state, it is their defining visual marker. It grounds them before the chaos of their unstable DNA takes over.
Chaos is definitely the right word, because we have this blank slate, this creature of pure potential.
Right.
But the true legend of this hedgehog really begins when that wet clay is exposed to extreme elemental radiation.
The evolutionary trigger.
Yeah, because the transformations we're talking about aren't just cosmetic changes.
No, not at all.
They aren't just growing a thicker coat for the winter. These are brutal, permanent biological rewrites.
The primary triggers for the most drastic of these shifts are physical crystalline stones that radiate highly concentrated elemental energy. We are talking about localized radiation that specifically targets and agitates the hedgehog's unstable genome.
So it's not a slow process.
Not at all. Just physical contact with one of these stones triggers the DNA to adapt violently and permanently to survive the radiation.
The source texts outline 3 primary physical stones: the water stone, the thunder stone, and the fire stone.
Let's start with the water stone.
Yeah, because this one seems to be the least, well, torturous.
It is arguably the most harmonious.
Exposure to this stone yields the aquatic hedgehog, commonly referred to as the bubble jet Pokemon.
All right.
And the biological shift here is wild. The texts say its cells literally become similar to water molecules.
They do.
How does a mammalian structure even function like that?
It comes down to cellular composition and refraction.
Refraction, like light.
Exactly. When the unstable DNA is exposed to the water stone's radiation, it fundamentally alters the density and the lipid structure of the creature's cells.
Okay, so it changes on a microscopic level.
Yes. The cells begin to hold and process water at such a hyper-efficient rate that the creature's refractive index, the way light bends through its body, matches that of the surrounding water.
Wait, really?
Yeah. This is how it perfectly melts into aquatic environments completely unseen.
That is breathtaking.
It doesn't just swim in the water. On a cellular level, it temporarily becomes indistinguishable from it.
And because it does that, it actually has the longest lifespan of the evolved forms, right?
It does. If we look at longevity and cellular health, the aquatic hedgehog represents perfect biological synergy.
Because it's not fighting its environment.
Exactly. Because its cellular structure mimics its environment, it flows seamlessly. It encounters almost zero environmental friction.
That makes total sense.
It doesn't have to fight to maintain its body temperature or structural integrity in the water. Therefore, it suffers very little internal cellular degradation over time.
So how long does it live?
It can live up to 30 years. It is a highly serene existence.
Serene. Yeah. The wet clay was gently dissolved into a peaceful pond.
A great way to visualize it.
But then you look at the other two elemental stones, and any sense of serenity goes right out the window.
Oh, absolutely.
The thunderstone triggers the electric hedgehog, and the firestone triggers the fiery hedgehog.
Yeah.
And the biological mechanics required to make these forms exist are terrifying.
They really represent the biological containment of highly volatile, destructive forces.
Containment, that's the key word.
Yes, the electric hedgehog's evolution forces its nervous system to act as a living battery and conductor.
Just constantly surging with power.
Exactly. It is tasked with constantly generating, discharging, and storing raw voltage.
And then the fiery hedgehog literally houses an internal flame sac in his chest that burns at 1600 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's astounding.
I had to pause when I read that. I want you, the listener right now, to really think about the mechanics of that.
It's hard to even fathom.
We are talking about a flesh and blood mammalian creature containing a literal furnace inside its rib cage that is hot enough to melt aluminum. How does its own heart not boil? How do its lungs not scorch?
The biological adaptations required to survive that internal furnace are staggering.
They have to be.
To prevent its organs from incinerating, the creature's DNA has to rapidly develop specialized thermal regulating tissues.
Like fireproof organs.
Essentially, yes. It likely utilizes a hyper-accelerated cooling system, perhaps sweating or panting out excess heat at an incredible rate.
Okay.
While its internal organs are wrapped in a biological equivalent of aerogel, a highly insulating tissue.
Oh, wow. That's a brilliant evolutionary trick.
It is, but the sheer internal stress of maintaining that containment field is unfathomable. Both the electric and fiery forms possess incredibly high energy metabolisms.
They are quite literally burning the candle at both ends.
Exactly.
And this is where I found a really tragic irony in this whole biological lore.
The lifespan issue.
Yeah. When we use the word evolution, we generally assume it means an upgrade.
Right, a step forward.
A biological step forward to ensure a species' survival, resilience, and longevity.
That's the standard Darwinian view.
But in the case of the electric and fiery hedgehogs, gaining this immense awe-inspiring elemental power is actually a massive detriment to their longevity.
It really is.
It literally halves their potential lifespan compared to their aquatic sibling. The records state they only live 18 to 22 years.
It is a profound biological trade-off.
It's sad, honestly.
They burn incredibly bright, but they burn incredibly fast. Their bodies simply cannot withstand the persistent physical duress of the elements they have internalized.
So they basically wear themselves out.
Yes. The unstable DNA adapts to harness the power to survive the initial shock of the radioactive stone, but the organic vessel still has its absolute limits.
Cellular exhaustion sets in.
Precisely. The oxidative stress of generating 1600 degrees of heat, or the neurological degradation of constantly channeling raw electricity, it slowly breaks the body down.
The wet clay was fired in a kiln that was simply too hot.
And over time, it becomes brittle and cracks.
That makes total sense, but it's still wild to think that touching a rock dictates all of that.
It is extreme environmental determinism.
But if touching a radioactive stone is a simple, albeit extreme, physical trigger,
right.
Here is where the lore gets genuinely unbelievable. The expert in our source transcript, I think Julian again points out that the creature's DNA is so hypersensitive that it doesn't even need a magic radioactive stone to trigger a permanent rewrite.
No, it doesn't.
The DNA can be fundamentally altered by ambient geography, the time of day, and most incredibly, how much it is loved.
The psychological and celestial triggers are where this species elevates from a fascinating biological curiosity to a true marvel.
Yeah, let's talk about the diurnal and nocturnal forms.
Let's examine them.
Yeah.
These evolutions are not triggered by a physical stone.
No stones involved.
They are triggered by a specific, intense emotional state intersecting with the Earth's rotation.
Right. So if this normal hedgehog experiences high friendship, meaning it forms a deep, trusting, loving bond with its trainer or companion,
the emotional catalyst,
and it happens to level up or experience a significant moment of growth during the daytime, the sunlight hitting it, combined with that positive emotional state, triggers it to evolve into the psychic hedgehog.
The sun Pokemon.
Exactly.
The ambient solar radiation, combined with the neurochemicals released by feelings of intense safety and defection, somehow unlock immense psychic potential within its malleable brain structure.
But if that exact same baseline emotional state of high friendship is present and the moment of growth occurs at night,
You get the complete opposite.
you get the dark type evolution, the ghostly hedgehog or the moonlight Pokemon.
Its body adapts to absorb lunar energy instead of solar.
Its fur turns dark, and it develops these rings that physically glow in the dark, allowing it to manipulate shadowy auras.
It is a staggering divergence based entirely on circadian rhythms.
It's so poetic.
The emotion is identical. The biological foundation is identical.
The only variable is the position of the sun and the presence of lunar light.
Exactly.
I want you to really internalize this. Imagine your own biology shifting drastically and permanently, based entirely on the clock.
It's a surreal thought experiment.
Imagine you have this massive personal breakthrough. You feel intensely loved, deeply supported by your community.
A really peak emotional moment.
Yeah, and if you have that realization at noon, your DNA rewrites you into a telepathic being of light.
Right.
But if you have that exact same warm, fuzzy realization at midnight, your DNA rewrites you into a creature of shadows that manipulates dark energy.
It just blows my mind that the clay is that sensitive to ambient light.
It forces us to consider how deeply intertwined biology and the cosmos really are for this creature.
And it's worth noting that both the psychic and the dark forms share a similar lifespan, averaging around 25 years.
So they fall right in the middle.
Yes, they live longer than the fire or electric types because they aren't under the extreme physical duress of internal heat or voltage.
But they don't live quite as long as the aquatic one.
Correct. Their lifespan is still capped because maintaining constant psychic links or constantly generating and manipulating dark auras takes a heavy neurological toll.
The brain is doing all the heavy lifting.
Exactly. The brain is the organ bearing the brunt of the evolutionary stress here, rather than the heart or the lungs.
So if a trainer wants their hedgehog to live the longest possible life, but doesn't have a water stone, they have to go the geographical route.
The environmental adapters.
Yes. The transcript details two very specific location-based evolutions.
Let's talk about the grassy hedgehog first.
The verdant Pokemon. This is triggered by leveling up near a specific moss rock deep in a dense forest.
Right.
And its cellular structure becomes closer to a plant than an animal. The text says it literally performs photosynthesis.
It does.
I have to push back again. Is it actually turning into a plant? Or is this some kind of symbiotic relationship with moss?
It appears to be a radical form of endosymbiosis.
Endosymbiosis.
Yes. The creature's mammalian cells don't fully turn into plant cells, but its unstable DNA rapidly integrates chloroplasts into its own skin and fur.
Chloroplasts being the things in plants that make them green and process sunlight.
Exactly. The structures that conduct photosynthesis, it begins to draw energy directly from sunlight and ambient nutrients in the soil.
That is just incredible.
It is an incredible leap for mammalian DNA, essentially bridging the gap between fauna and flora.
And on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, we have the icy hedgehog.
The fresh snow Pokemon.
This one is triggered by growing near an ice rock in a tundra.
Yes.
And its biological adaptation is that it can lower its body temperature to negative 75 degrees Fahrenheit in order to freeze the surrounding air.
It's an extreme adaptation.
Negative 75 degrees. Human cells rupture and die from frostbite at just slightly below freezing.
They do.
How does it not shatter its own tissues?
It must rapidly synthesize specialized antifreeze proteins within its bloodstream.
Biological antifreeze.
Yes. These proteins bind to small ice crystals to inhibit their growth, preventing the creature's cells from rupturing from the inside out.
Wow.
It essentially replaces the water in its cells with this biological antifreeze.
That is incredible. And what these two geographic forms share is a return to that concept of synergy we saw with the aquatic hedgehog.
Total environmental harmony.
If they are kept in their ideal habitats, a pristine, sunlit forest for the grassy form, or a deep permafrost tundra for the icy form, they thrive.
Precisely, because their metabolisms slow down significantly in these states.
Right.
The grassy form passively photosynthesizes, and the icy form enters a state of near cryostasis.
You just chill out, literally.
They adapt so perfectly to the passive, slow rhythm of wild nature that they suffer almost no cellular degradation.
That's amazing.
In these ideal environments, they can survive for 28 to 32 years. They are harmonizing with the environment, not fighting to contain it.
Okay, so up until now, we've seen this wet clay of a creature shaped by localized elemental radiation.
Right. The stone.
By the gravitational pull of the sun and the moon.
The diurnal and nocturnal shifts.
But by the silent patience of forests and glaciers.
The environmental synergy.
And by the power of high friendship and love. It's all very cinematic, almost poetic.
It paints a very beautiful picture of adaptation.
But what happens when that completely unstable, highly malleable DNA is subjected to intense, prolonged psychological trauma?
This is where our deep dive shifts fundamentally.
Yeah, this is the core of what we were talking about today.
It gets very dark from here.
This leads us directly back to the Dragon Slayer we mentioned at the very beginning. The legend of the mystical hedgehog.
The mystical hedgehog, designated in the lore records as the intertwining Pokemon.
Right.
It is the fairy type evolution of this species. And what makes it so uniquely compelling is that it has two drastically different biological origins.
Two paths to the exact same creature.
Exactly. Two completely different paths to arriving at the exact same physical form.
Which is so unusual for this species, right?
It's the only one that does this.
Yeah.
The first path is what the researchers affectionately call the hero path.
And this hero path totally aligns with that sanitized, pristine fairy aesthetic we talked about at the beginning.
The cute animated show vibe.
Yes. If the normal hedgehog levels up while knowing a fairy-type move and has at least two hearts of affection.
Meaning a really deep, unconditionally loving bond with its trainer.
Right. It evolves into a creature that uses delicate, silk-like ribbons to soothe auras and spread peace.
It literally senses hostility and uses its ribbons to calm the minds of those around it.
It's the literal embodiment of love, triggering a beautiful healing metamorphosis.
It is the ultimate expression of positive nurture. But the primary focus of the debate among our group of friends in the transcript, specifically a very impassioned argument made by Marcus Niskol.
Oh, Marcus went off on this.
He really did. It centers on the alternative origin, the dark path.
The dark path.
This is an evolution forced not by love, but by severe emotional isolation.
It occurs when there is little to no friendship.
Perhaps there is even active hostility or neglect between the creature and its trainer.
Right, and here's the catalyst for the nightmare. While this creature is being denied love, while it is isolated and emotionally starved, the trainer forces the hedgehog to learn a steel-type move.
And to understand why that is so devastating, you have to understand the elemental mechanics of this world.
The type matchups.
Exactly. The fairy type is biologically weak against the steel type.
Steel is its natural predator.
It is its elemental antithesis.
So I want you to picture this. Imagine being locked in a room.
A terrible scenario.
You are completely isolated, you feel no love, no support, and you are forced to study and master the very thing that is biologically destined to destroy you.
It's psychological torture.
You are locked in a room with your absolute worst phobia and forced to internalize it until it becomes a part of you.
Right.
If you have a lump of wet clay that is hypersensitive to its environment and you bathe it in pure terror and isolation, what does that highly unstable DNA do?
It panics.
It just freaks out.
It initiates an evolutionary failsafe born entirely out of trauma.
A failsafe.
Yes, this is not a natural harmonious progression like the grassy or aquatic forms. It is a violent biological reaction to survive a hostile existence.
So how does the biology process that?
The creature's biology realizes that, based on its underlying potential, it is destined to become a fairy type.
Right, the fairy movement primes it for that.
Exactly. But it is currently steeped in the trauma of steel, its ultimate weakness.
So instead of generating those soft, soothing silk ribbons meant for holding hands and calming auras,
It internalizes the steel-type trauma and weaponizes its own vulnerability.
it generates battle-hardened, serrated metal feelers.
It's terrifying.
Fleshy appendages that might look like silk from a distance, but are actually razor-sharp metal ribbons.
They are weapons.
They can slice through the armored scales of a dragon like they are nothing. It weaponizes the trauma just to survive the day.
It has no other choice.
It literally forces its DNA to become the thing that was meant to destroy it, so that nothing can ever hurt it again.
The clay was infused with shrapnel.
Shrapnel, exactly.
It is a stunning, albeit horrific, biological adaptation.
It really is.
And this traumatic origin perfectly explains the broader combat mechanics and the deeper lore of this entire world.
Marcus makes such a good point about this in the transcript.
He points out a major logical inconsistency in the lore that this origin finally solves.
Have you ever wondered why the delicate fairy type is considered super effective against the massive, destructive dragon type?
It never made sense on the surface.
I always thought it was ridiculous. It's not because they are sprinkling pixie dust on these giant fire-breathing leviathans to put them to sleep.
Oh, it's a bloodbath.
It's because of this specific battle-hardened variant of the fairy. This creature evolved specifically to slaughter Ekex predators.
It is a spite-fueled dragon slayer.
It developed those serrated ribbons for the express purpose of cutting through the toughest armor in existence.
Precisely. And this same traumatic origin explains why the fairy type is also super effective against fighting types.
Oh, right.
Think about the sheer, unadulterated courage it takes to internalize that much trauma.
To weaponize your own phobia.
And to stand face to face with a dragon. It means this creature can easily outbrave any martial artist.
It just doesn't care anymore.
It relies on a hardened, almost psychotic survival instinct that disciplined martial arts simply cannot counter.
It is erratic, spiteful, and completely without fear.
Exactly.
I am just actively marveling at how this completely flips all of our preconceived notions on their head.
It's a masterclass in world building.
You hear the phrase fairy type, and you immediately think of glitter, giggles, and innocence.
You think of the fairy garden.
But this biological lore is telling us that the ultimate manifestation of a fairy is a creature born of deep resentment,
Armed with serrated metal.
hunting dragons out of sheer spite. It's incredibly dark, but it is an amazing piece of world building that grounds the magic in a brutal reality.
It grounds it in the reality of consequence.
Consequence, yes.
Having explored the awe-inspiring and terrifying potential of this creature's DNA, we have to look at the ultimate consequence of these evolutions.
What happens next?
Right. What does this intense genetic malleability mean for the final fate of the hedgehogs themselves?
Because once that normal hedgehog makes its choice, once it reacts to the stone, the sun, or the trauma, its physiological trajectory locks in permanently.
There is no undo button.
Yeah, the wet clay is fired in the kiln. There is no going back. You cannot unevolve.
And the lifespan of the mystical hedgehog is a really tragic reflection of the bonds that created it.
Let's talk about that lifespan.
Let's look at the hero path first. The fairy, born of high affection and love,
Okay.
because its entire biological metamorphosis was triggered by positive emotional energy, its life force remains intrinsically tied to its trainer's aura.
So it feeds off that bond.
It is sustained entirely by the emotional bonds that forged it.
Because of that, it has a long lifespan, right? If the bond is strong, it can live up to 30 years, matching the serene aquatic hedgehog.
It can, yes. However, that longevity comes with a profound vulnerability.
What's the catch?
Because its existence is so deeply tethered to that love, if that connection wanes, if the trainer abandons it, or tragically, if the trainer passes away,
Oh, no.
the hedgehog often passes away peacefully shortly after.
Just like that.
Its biology simply cannot sustain itself without the localized emotional environment that formed it.
It is literally capable of dying from a broken heart because its heart was built out of love.
That is exactly what happens.
Oh, man. That is heartbreaking.
It is deeply tragic.
But what about the dark path? The dragon slayer with the metal ribbons? Does it have a long life, since it's so incredibly tough?
According to Marcus in the transcript, science hasn't documented enough of the dark path variants in the wild to give a definitive average lifespan.
Because they're too dangerous.
They are too dangerous and too elusive. But the lore strongly suggests a very grim fate.
I figured as much.
Think about a creature born of absolute resentment,
Yeah.
an existence fueled purely by combat, paranoia, and spite, rather than love or synergy.
That's got to take a toll.
The consensus is that it likely only lives until it finally meets a dragon it cannot slay.
Live by the sword, die by the sword.
Exactly. Its life is a constant, violent struggle for survival, and it eventually falls in battle.
It just burns out.
It burns out not from heat or electricity, but from pure, unyielding hostility.
So what does this all mean for us?
Huh?
When we zoom out and look at this entire deep dive?
What's the takeaway?
Yeah, this bizarre, fascinating lore is the most perfect, extreme microcosm of the nature versus nurture debate I think I have ever seen.
It truly is. The normal hedgehog represents pure, unadulterated potential.
A literal blank slate.
What it becomes, the elemental weapons it wields, the physiological adaptations it develops, and exactly how long it survives on this earth is dictated entirely by what it touches, where it sleeps, and the profound extremes of how deeply it is loved or how deeply it is hated.
And I think that's exactly why analyzing this lore resonates so much with us, even if it is fiction.
The themes are universal.
Obviously, you and I don't sprout serrated metal ribbons from our arms when we have a terrible day.
No, thankfully not.
We don't burst into a 1600-degree flame when we're stressed at work, and we don't melt into puddles of water when we're relaxed.
Though sometimes it feels like we might.
Right. But our environments, the communities we're placed in, and the trauma or the love we experience undeniably shape us.
Absolutely.
They shape our physical health, our mental well-being, and the emotional armor we put on to face the world over time.
The biological metaphors here are exceptionally strong. Epigenetics in the real world shows us that prolonged stress and trauma can literally alter how our genes express themselves, passing markers down to future generations.
We carry our environments with us, written into our biology.
The hedgehog's just a visual amplification of that very real human experience.
We really do carry it with us. So, to quickly recap the incredible journey we've been on today.
It's been quite a ride.
We started with the blank slate, normal hedgehog, a creature of pure, unstable DNA, waiting to be formed. We watched it melt into water, burn with impossible internal heat, harness the cycles of the sun and moon, and merge its very cells with forests and ice. And finally, we uncover the dual nature of the mystical hedgehog, a fairy that can either be a tethered manifestation of unconditional love or a metal-ribboned, dragon-slaying weapon born entirely of trauma.
But before we conclude, there is one final provocative thought regarding all of this that the source text hints at but leaves wonderfully unanswered.
Oh, yes.
It is a biological hypothetical that I think is worth considering based on everything we've established.
I know exactly where you were going with this,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the detail that has been bothering me since we brought it up.
The slime.
The slime.
We established early in the deep dive that the highly efficient, shape-shifting lavender slime perfectly imitates these creatures in order to breed and produce the blank slate eggs.
It completely rearranges its own cellular structure to match whatever mate it is presented with.
Right. A perfect biological mirror. So, what happens if that lavender slime is tasked with breeding with a dark path mystical hedgehog?
If it perfectly mimics a creature whose very cellular structure is a weaponized reaction to severe emotional trauma.
Does the slime temporarily experience that trauma?
No.
Does the sheer biological spite, the internalized terror of the steel-type weakness, and the paranoid survival instinct translate into the mimic?
That is horrifying.
And if so, does imitating weaponized trauma leave a lasting psychological or physical scar on a creature that is supposed to be nothing but a blank, shape-shifting mirror?
Can you mimic a scar without feeling the cut?
Exactly.
That is a deeply mind-bending thought.
It changes how you look at the whole ecosystem.
It's one thing to mimic the physical shape of a serrated ribbon.
Yeah.
It's another thing entirely to mimic the biological panic and the hatred that forced that ribbon into existence.
It's a pretty profound reminder for all of us.
It really is. It's a reminder to consider the hidden emotional weight carried by the people and the creatures around us.
You never know what people are going through.
You really never know what kind of trauma went into forging their armor or what it cost them to maintain it.
Well said.
Well, that is all the time we have for today's exploration. I want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the fairy garden.
And into the brutal, beautiful biology that lies far beyond it.
Keep questioning the lore, keep exploring the hidden depths of the stories you thought you knew, and most importantly, stay curious.